Over the past weekend, Russian President Vladimir Putin thought he could put Ukraine on the ropes. He launched the largest ever Russian drone strike against Ukraine, sending hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles to target the country's major cities. Ukraine wasn't going to take this lying down. It has responded with a massive drone strike of its own, and frankly, Ukraine's attack was much more effective. Where Putin targeted civilians with his drones, Ukraine's biggest drone strike ever has obliterated a Russian missile plant just outside of Moscow. Ukraine's target was the Raduga enterprise, which is in the small town of Dubna that lies within the Moscow oblast. There's a big reason why this factory was a target. It's responsible for producing many of the cruise missiles that Russia uses to bombard Ukraine's cities on an almost daily basis. The Kyiv Independent carried the initial report about the strike. It says that Ukraine's long-range drones arrived in Dubna during the evening of May 27th. Once there, they were able to bypass the extensive air defenses Russia had in place to strike the Raduga factory's assembly lines and outfitting workshops. As of 3 p.m. on May 28th, both of those locations were still ablaze, according to one source the outlet spoke to. The strike was made all the more impressive because it struck a facility that is just 80 miles outside of Moscow. That meant Ukraine was sending a dual warning with this attack. Not only did it show Putin once again that it has drones capable of striking deep inside Russian territory, but it proved to Russia's leader that those drones can reach Moscow whenever Ukraine wants them to. The New Voice of Ukraine also reported on the successful Ukrainian strike, confirming many of the details shared in the Kyiv Independence report. It also noted that the plant was part of Russia's Tactical Missile Corporation, and that it manufactures several types of air-to-air, air-to-ground, and ground-to-ground missiles. Among them are the KH-101, KH-555, KH-69, and the KH-59MK. We'll dig into all of those missiles in a moment. A source who spoke to the outlet also confirmed the strike on Ukraine's side, stating, "The SBU continues to strike with surgical precision at key enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex, whose products serve as weapons in the war against Ukraine." The source added a chilling message clearly intended for Putin's ears. The SBU's drone sanctions against the Russian army's technological rear will continue. So Ukraine has just taken out a facility responsible for building hundreds of Russian cruise missiles annually. Here's why that's important. Raduga produces the 4 missiles we mentioned earlier, each of which represents a massive threat to Ukraine, because Putin has been using them to attack its cities, civilians, and its military infrastructure. Starting with the KH-101, Missile Threat says this missile is capable of carrying conventional warheads, which are launched from aerial platforms. It's also specially designed to defeat air defenses and is capable of flying low and hugging the terrain to stay away from the high altitudes that allow air defense radars to track them down. The missile carries an 882-pound payload that can come in 3 varieties: high explosive, fragmentation, or submunition. It's a long-range missile too, as it's able to fly up to 1,739 miles. That makes it dangerous. Russia can send its jets into the skies far away from the Ukraine war's front lines to launch its KH-101s without worrying about Ukraine being able to retaliate. At least it did. Now the factory that builds these powerful missiles lies in ruins. The KH-555 is no less dangerous. Based on the Soviet-era KH-55, the missile is a long-range subsonic weapon that can be loaded with both conventional and nuclear warheads. It entered service near the turn of the millennium and can be fired from Russia's Tu-95MS and Tu-160 strategic bombers. It's lighter than the KH-101, with the missile weighing over 2,800 pounds and still being capable of traveling a little over 1,550 miles. However, the missile's warhead is actually a little smaller, the maximum size being 903 pounds. Still more than enough to devastate a target if it strikes home. Add precision into the mix, as the missile is accurate to a range of 65 feet, and you get a terrifying weapon, even if it's one that can be tackled by air defense systems and Ukraine's fighter jets. The hits keep on coming with the KH-69. The third missile Ukraine just prevented Russia from building is also a cruise missile, though this one was designed by the very Raduga facility that Ukraine just decimated. It's air-launched, capable of traveling at subsonic speed, and was designed specifically as a precision missile Russia can use to attack high-value targets. The KH-69 carries a smaller warhead than the other 2 missiles we've covered, with the weapon's explosive power weighing in at 683 pounds. However, it makes up for that comparative lack of firepower by allowing Russia to use either a high explosive or penetration warhead. The latter is especially important. Penetration warheads are designed to break through armor, such as the reinforced concrete of a weapon's storage depot, before delivering their payload. The weapon has a shorter range, only being capable of traveling up to 284 miles, but it makes up for that by hitting speeds of 621 miles per hour. That's not quite the speed of sound, but it's fast enough to make the KH-69 a definite threat when launched alongside decoy drones at a Ukrainian target. Finally, there's the Kh-59MK. Introduced in 2001, the missile has the shortest range of the four, as it's only capable of traveling for 177 miles before it has to touch down. That indicates to us that Russia has been using the missile much closer to the front lines than the other three. It's likely one of the missiles being launched from Russia's border-adjacent air bases to hurt Ukraine's defenses, allowing Putin's ground forces to pour in. The Kh-59MK is a guided air-to-surface missile that features an active homing radar head that allows it to strike ground targets in almost any weather conditions. It's about as fast as the Kh-69 and it carries a 705-pound warhead. It's a tried, tested, and devastating weapon that Ukraine has to deal with, along with the other three missiles we've mentioned, on a near-daily basis. Make no mistake about it, all four of these missiles are a vital part of the aerial strategy Putin is using to bombard Ukraine. The May 27th drone strike hasn't taken out any of the storage facilities Russia uses to safeguard the missiles it's already built. In the immediate sense, that means we're likely to see a few more of all four of these missiles being sent into Ukraine in the coming months. However, Ukraine has taken a longer-term approach with its May 27th attack. By taking out the Raduga facility's assembly line and production capabilities, it's just put Putin in a very tough spot. Russia's leader can continue his missile strikes for now. When his stockpiles run low, he won't be able to build any more until the Raduga plant is repaired. If this was all Ukraine had achieved on the evening of May 27th, that would be impressive enough. Taking such a massive bite out of Russia's missile production capabilities goes a long way toward relieving pressure on Ukraine's forces on the ground. However, there's more, much more. Along with the headline strike against the Raduga plant, Ukraine targeted several other Russian weapon production facilities over the past couple of days. Among them was the Kronstadt drone factory, which is responsible for building the Orion, Grom, Molnaya, and several other types of drones Russia uses to pelt Ukraine's cities. Again, Ukraine's drones faced heavy fire from Russia's air defense systems. It wasn't enough. At least some of the drones hit their targets, with the Kyiv Independent reporting that residents near the Kronstadt facility show videos showing drones flying over their city and smoke rising from the location of the drone factory. Ukraine didn't stop there. From May 27th into May 28th, Ukraine also hit the Angstrom JSC facility, which is also located in the Moscow Oblast. The factory produces micro-components Russia uses in many of its weapons, including the 4 missiles Ukraine just stopped Russia from building with the Raduga plant. Think of this as a 1-2 punch. With the Angstrom facility out of commission, Russia may find it hard to build its missiles even if it gets Raduga up and running again. Ukraine also struck the NP Fyodorov Dubna machine building plant, which also builds drones, a facility inside a technology park, and, the day before the Raduga attack, a chemical plant in the Ivanovo Oblast. That plant is also important. It's responsible for creating the organic chemicals needed for Russia to make everything from gunpowder and explosives to fuel for its aircraft and rockets. If the strikes against Raduga and Angstrom comprised a 1-2 punch that knocked Russia's missile-producing capabilities down, the Ivanovo strike was a kick to the head that put an end to the fight. And as if things couldn't get any worse for Russia, Putin had to deal with another problem. Ukraine's drone attacks also shut down a trio of Moscow's airports. The Vnukovo, Zhukovsky, and Domodedovo airports were all forced to temporarily cease their operations as Ukraine's drone horde came in, and Russia was forced to reply with air defense missiles. So not only did Ukraine just take a massive bite out of Russia's missile production capabilities, but it wrought havoc that served as a reminder to everyday Russians that Ukraine can bring the war Putin started back home to roost. How has Russia responded to all of this? The same way it usually does. It's trying to hide the fact that Ukraine just conducted one of the biggest and most successful drone strikes of the war. The only thing Russia is admitting is that the drone attack in Moscow was large enough to shut down a few airports. Russia can do that because airport closures are par for the course when dealing with Ukraine's aerial assaults. The country wants you to believe that the airports were closed temporarily while its air defenses shot down every drone that Ukraine sent its way. That's confirmed by the Russian Defense Ministry, telling us that its air defenses destroyed 296 Ukrainian drones over multiple regions during the attack. Of course, there's no mention of any of those drones striking their targets, despite the reports of fires and smoke emerging from many of its facilities. If Russia does end up commenting, it'll likely say what it always says. Fires were caused by debris from the drones that it shot down. By now, we know that claim is a load of nonsense. What Russia's defense ministry has confirmed is that these attacks combined to represent the biggest single drone strike Ukraine has ever conducted on Russian territory. If we assume that Russia's statement about shooting down 296 drones is accurate, and we know that Ukraine hit home with at least some of its drones, that tells us that Ukraine just sent more than 300 unmanned aerial vehicles into Russian territory on May 27th and into May 28th. That's huge. And it leads us to an important question. Why? The main answer can be delivered in 3 words: tit for tat. It's no coincidence that Ukraine's largest ever drone strike comes off the back of Russia pelting Ukraine with drones of its own over the last weekend. According to the Kyiv Independent, Russia launched over 600 drones, along with dozens of missiles at Ukraine between May 24th and May 26th, with the largest of these strikes coming on Sunday. On that day, Russia sent a record-breaking 355 drones into Ukraine, killing 6 people and injuring at least 24 during the crescendo of its weekend attacks. Missiles were also part of this record-breaking day. The Kyiv Independent reports that Russia launched 9 Kh-101 cruise missiles from its Tu-95MS bomber planes to accompany the 355 drones. Many of those drones were attack-type Shahids made by Iran, though Russia also sent decoy drones to confuse Ukraine's air defenses so these attack types, along with the missiles, could break through. Ukraine put up a strong response to this attack. The decoy drones didn't prevent its air defenses from shooting down all 9 of the Kh-101s, along with 233 of Russia's drones. A further 55 were neutralized using electronic warfare tactics, Ukraine claims, with others simply disappearing from Ukraine's radars. The May 26th strike also came on the back of Russia sending 298 drones into Ukraine the day prior, which itself broke Russia's record for a 24-hour drone assault. The strikes were so intensive that Poland was forced to place its air defenses on high alert in case it needed to respond to a Russian drone that went awry. What we've just seen in Raduga is a message from Ukraine to Russia. You can send hundreds of drones to attack our cities, but we can do the same right back. Only Ukraine isn't hitting cities. Where Putin aims to terrorize civilians to get his way, Ukraine is targeting the facilities that allow him to conduct his strikes. Ukraine hit the facility that built the very missile it was forced to shoot down just a couple of days earlier. It also destroyed a pair of drone manufacturing factories, along with the supporting missiles that make components and chemicals Russia's missiles need. Speaking of missiles, that brings us to the second reason Ukraine hit Raduga and several supporting facilities. It needs to minimize the threat that Putin's missiles pose. As showcased by the May 26th Russian strikes, Putin's strategy over 3 years into the war often devolves into using his long-range missiles to terrorize Ukraine. Some of those missiles are aimed at legitimate military targets. Many, such as we saw over the weekend, target Ukraine's civilians. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, has published a couple of articles that highlight just how intensive Russia's missile strikes against Ukraine are. In October 2024, CSIS published a piece that revealed that Russia launched a staggering 11,466 missiles at Ukraine between September 28, 2022 and September 1, 2024. That amounts to an average of 23.2 missiles launched per day, though there have been several days where Russia has launched more. Specifically, CSIS points to 17 days during its study period where Russia's missile launches surpassed 82 missiles in 24 hours. Often, these more intense days accompanied offensives on the ground, though Russia sometimes used them as responses to battlefield developments that weren't going their way. We can do some quick math for this. The study period roughly covers 24 months of Russia's missile strikes. That allows us to determine that Russia was firing roughly 477 missiles at Ukraine per month between September 22 and September 24. There have been 8 more months of fighting since CSIS published these figures. Assuming Russia has maintained the same volume of missile strikes between September 24 and May 25, that amounts to around 3,800 more missiles to add to the 11,466 CSIS highlight. No wonder Ukraine is targeting Russia's missile production facilities. Putin's missile assaults are relentless. A second CSIS article, published in February 2025, highlights just how damaging Russia's missiles are. This time, the article studied Ukraine's missile interception rate between September 28, 2022 and October 6, 2024. In that roughly 2-year period, Ukraine managed to shoot down 84.1% of the missiles and drones that Russia sent into Ukraine, giving us a rough interception success rate of about 4 out of every 5. Again, some quick math reveals the scale of the problem. If we take the 3,800 missiles figure we found earlier, that covers the period from October 24 to today, CSIS's statistics show us that Ukraine managed to destroy 3,198 of those missiles. That leaves around 604 that managed to reach their targets, or at least weren't destroyed by air defenses and electronic warfare. That's 604 too many. And it proves that as effective as Ukraine's air defenses are, they aren't perfect. They can't be. Ukraine likely has to pick and choose which missiles it targets due to having limited supplies of the ammunition it needs to take out these constant hordes of aerial threats. Therein lies the problem. Putin knows that he can break through Ukraine's air defenses with sheer numbers. It's an extension of the human wave tactics he uses on the ground. Just keep sending more and more until, eventually, Ukraine's stockpiles are exhausted, or a small percentage of what you send breaks through. All of this information matters because it offers further context for the Raduga strike. Yes, Ukraine wanted to get revenge for what Russia did over the weekend by proving that it could hit Moscow with drone hordes just as large as the ones Putin was sending into Ukraine. However, Ukraine wasn't going to be stupid about it. What we saw on May 27th and 28th was a series of very coordinated attacks designed to strike at the heart of Russia's missile production capabilities. While revenge may have been a motivating factor for Ukraine, The real reason for its strikes is that it wants to pull down the number of missiles Putin can launch into its territory. Taking out missile storage facilities wouldn't have done the job. Russia could always build more missiles. By taking out the factories Russia uses to make those missiles, Ukraine has just created a massive long-term problem for Putin that Russia's leader will need to solve if he intends to continue his missile-centric approach. Oh, and it doesn't hurt that Ukraine's strike also shut down some of Russia's airports. That's also becoming a key tactic from 2025 alone. It's used its drone hordes to force a staggering 217 temporary airport closures as of May 22nd. That's more closures in less than 5 months than Russia was forced to make in 2023 and 2024 combined. There's a method behind this strategy, as Ukrainian Defense Army Southern Division spokesperson Serhiy Bratchuk explains. Moscow is the biggest aviation hub in the Russian Federation. Flights go everywhere, not only across Russia, but worldwide. This is about the potential disintegration of Russian regions and the weakening of internal control. In other words, Putin is using drone attacks against Russia's military facilities to bring Putin's invasion to the Russian people in a way that doesn't require Ukraine to kill civilians. Ukraine's largest ever drone assault on Moscow just added 3 more of those airport closures to the list, and the odds are that Ukraine is just getting started with its new aerial strategy. Ukraine said so itself. More is coming as Ukraine whittles away at Putin's weapons-building capabilities. What do you think about Ukraine's largest ever drone strike? Was it an adequate response to what Putin did in Ukraine over the weekend? How much of an impact will losing several missiles and drone production facilities have on Russia? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in the Ukraine war.